Dan, I appreciate you taking time. It's always fun chatting.
Sure, of course.
What I'd love to is like, why don't we just this recording will go along with the interview, the case study that we posted. Why don't we just chat through some of the questions and we can just see how it goes.
Sure,
When you tell me a little about GWWO as a firm first, what kind of stuff you do and your role there.
sure. We're a 65 person firm, Baltimore. We have an office in Connecticut as well. We do a lot of educational and cultural facilities. So that is K through 12, higher ed, and museums, visitor centers, nature centers, that kind of thing.
How long have you guys been multi-office? I wasn't aware you had multi-offices.
It's pretty recent. We're coming up on 3 years, so it's a pretty small extension of the office, but they've got some good people up there, and it gives us access to more projects in the New England area.
How have you found? I now realize I'm getting into like talking my book a little bit, so don't answer this as if I'm the CEO of Arcol answering asking this question.
Uh,
Um, how do you find collaborating across offices as a like new multi office team? How's that transition been?
there was a lot of lessons to learn. We have always been one office, and there was, we learned some lessons. The pandemic had happened, so we had a lot of the tools for collaboration that we initiated as part of the pandemic. So we figured a lot of those same systems and ideas would apply to our remote work. As much as we can, we try to keep the project teams, like if what the Connecticut team is working on Connecticut projects, and we're working on the other projects, but occasionally we'll need to have staff work across offices to get
Yeah.
projects done or across past deadlines, that sort of thing. So Revit was always an easy part because we have a collaboration for Revit. It's just BIM 360 ACC. But as far as like exchanging design ideas and talking over each other on video calls and trying to, there was I found that the person in charge of the Connecticut office, she just barrels through conversations because that's just instead of the awkward pauses, she just goes and then
I love it.
you just kind of fit in where she pauses. No, it's great. She's figured it out. So yeah, there was some learning to do, but we feel like we got it down pretty well now.
What kind of like tools outside the typical Revit ACC stuff have you guys adopted to kind of like deal with both during the pandemic and then as an office? An example here is like one of the tools that I saw get pretty widely and like virally adopted into firms is like Miro and Mural and
Hmm.
like whiteboarding tools,
Yeah.
which acted as we would typically all get into a conference room and bring our screenshots of our model and pin them up on the wall. And Miro was now the way to interact and have this kind of like collaborative mood boarding session. Do you guys have you guys adopted tools like that, and what's that
I
kind of
mean,
workflow
so
look like?
we're not currently customers of either Miro or Mural,
Hmm.
which were the two that we've been looking at. But what we found is that grassroots, they were doing it themselves. So I just last week I was invited to a Miro board. I registered and I went. I was just like, 15 people from GWWO are already using it. I'm the design technology manager. Why am I not aware of this? So people have been like just doing it on their own, which is actually kind of cool because new software and new ideas don't always come from my staff. Like a lot of mine is top down. And this is one of those examples where it was bottom up. So it was really cool to see that happen. I mean, we have access to Microsoft Teams like 99% of the world, but their whiteboard tools are a lot
They
of
suck.
video calls. Yeah, yeah, they're terrible. So yeah, so I mean, it was a lot of screen sharing, a lot of writing on each other's screens. We bought like draw boards and stuff to make drawing on top of things easier, but uh, yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's super interesting. You touched on it a little bit, but as a design technology manager or kind of like technology leader at your firm, that style of adoption of tool is in SaaS and in my world of like building technology is product led growth, which is you sell to the designers, the design because you're building for the end user experience. Enough designers get use out of it, and then you kind of like go to the CIO or leadership to say, you've got 30 people at the firm. Do you want to own licenses and do you want to standardize across those? That's the
Mm-hmm.
typical kind of like PLG motion. One of the things that when I started Arcol was really clear is that if we're going to sell design tools into this industry, they really have to be done through PLG. And like the extension of PLG just means you're building tools for the end designer. You're not building tools for admins in firms, and the admin use case kind of comes second. What is your thoughts on that? And I realize that may be a controversial take, given I'm talking to a design technology manager. But how do you view the like evolution of more tools getting adopted in a PLG fashion?
I mean, the tools have to work for the people. I mean, the I heard a quote once from he said something along the lines of technology is easy, the people are a pain in the ass.
Thousand
And
percent.
you got to sell the people. If the technology is not working for the people, then it's not going to work because then it's not going to get used. So you have to be able to solve an end user's problem for them to want to use it. And for me, I have the trust of my superiors in my office, and they know I have my ear to the ground, and I'm trying to reduce the number of tools that architects have to use, not increase them, because
Mm,
we have to juggle 20 different softwares over the lifespan of a project, and that's just a lot to know. And when people are joining a project from beginning to end, they've got, everything from programming and, feasibility and all the way down to rendering and finished, and then onto construction. There's another set of tools that you have to use. So if the technology works for the people, I try to, identify, because I'm the communication, like they're not communicating with people, they're focused on their jobs. And so, people reach out to me, I reach out to people, and we, talk about the tool. I play around with it. I have people play around with it. I kind of match the tool with the people. Got a group of people that are always willing to try new things. And if I can get that, then I can start calculating, how much time does it save,
mm.
equating that to dollars, and then talking about, what that means to the firm as a whole, to my management team. So it's not, I mean, to me, I've had more success that way in adopting new software than I have, you know, uh, I think there's one tool in which before I was taking on this role was, I don't know if you're familiar with Sapphira. They're owned by Trimble now. They were their
Okay.
own company, but SketchUp, they're now part of SketchUp, Trimble World. And, it's a sustainability software. It's like, it, lighting studies, going through options, like what if your R value is
Got it.
this versus that. If you had solar cells, what does that mean to your overall energy cost? But
Mm,
it never took off. Nobody ever used it. The reason was in SketchUp, since we go back and forth between SketchUp and Revit, all the walls are two planes, right? In order to do the analysis, you need a single plane modeling, in which case that meant a lot of work to dumb down the SketchUp models that they
mm.
were already had, and it just never got used because the technology wasn't in their workflow. So I have to that if I can solve the workflow problem, and then the rest kind of just falls into place. It's a lot easier for me to sell new tech that way too.
Makes total sense. I could talk to you for hours about the intersection of distribution and beautiful end user experiences, but I don't take too much
Now,
of our time talking about that. You mentioned describing your workflow as like multiple tools, and your job is to consolidate that as much as possible. I've never ever heard that before. That there's so many tools that architects have to use. Sense my sarcasm. Um, I'm curious. Let's kind of like use this as an opportunity to dive into kind of some of the specifics. What did your workflow look like at feasibility before you start using a tool like Arcol? I'm assuming it was a lot of tools with manually coordinating data. Um,
I mean, we'd get a desired program from a client. A lot of time it was in the K through 12 realm. They have to, analyze different options, renovation versus addition versus, combination of those, or build an entire new building altogether. And so we often have to come up with those options and report on them and give estimated costs and schedules and that sort of thing. So before it was a lot of, you'd operate in, some sort of sketching environment, whether it's by hand or just trying to get your spaces and organization, kind of placing things. That might be in SketchUp, it might be in Revit, but once you kind of have the idea, you kind of have a set, your ideas kind of settled. They end up going back and forth between SketchUp and Revit, because SketchUp, you have the flexibility and massing tools to do, manipulate geometry, but then they needed to bring that back into Revit to be able to calculate square footages and compare it to program and, do any other calculations, and then it's back to SketchUp. And then there's also, you have to do reports and costs and that sort of thing. So oftentimes that would go to Excel, and, any updates would need to be updated across all three platforms. And then you have Adobe InDesign, in which you're putting all of your findings in a report. So that's just for a feasibility study. And it's, that doesn't count any software that you might use to collaborate with the client about the options. So it's again, for something that is a study, something that's simple, I wouldn't think that you shouldn't need that many pieces of software to write a report. Just my opinion.
I fully agree. That's why we're building it. Tell me a little bit like your process, a little kind of more solely aimed towards your process for selecting new tools at feasibility, but also just generally how you approach evaluating new tools as the kind of like design technology leader in the firm.
Well, first, I'm inundated when people find me. You attend enough trade shows, conferences, and people find you. The person that takes the calls for the office, they screen a lot of my phone calls.
Oh,
Otherwise,
interesting. You get cold calls?
yeah, all the time.
Interesting.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, some of it's relevant, some of it's not. Like I just got IT services, which isn't my scope, but they look up who's a technology person at a given company, and they find me.
Have you ever
But
adopted a tool through cold calling?
no, not once.
Interesting. Interesting.
I mean, the thing is, I go to enough conferences and I talk to enough people that I have an idea of what the good stuff is.
Hmm.
There's stuff that's great that I think that we can use, or I'm watching development, so that maybe in the future they develop it so it is more applicable to my company. So a lot of the times I'm already aware of a lot of the software that we get, and I just kind of follow them for a while. And then when I see an opportunity, or I have an extra time, or I have a goal for the year, that find the software that I've been following that aligns with that goal, and start a conversation and go through that. But yeah, the because I go to the conferences and talk to people is pretty much where I get my first awareness, and then after that, research, and if there's a fit, we start a conversation and start playing around.
Interesting. Um, Super interesting. How do you think about the value that Arcol delivers to you? Why do you choose Arcol? I realize by the way we're all over the place, but fuck it, let's just roll with
Yeah, whatever. I can handle it. I have kids.
it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's coming back to trying to reduce the number of tools. Like I was preparing for a talk, a presentation, something unrelated, and I did some research on what other professions, how many pieces of software do other professions have to know? So I started with accounting. It's like, okay, got Excel, TurboTax. There's probably more, but I can't imagine a lot more. Um, Microsoft, the whole Office suite, maybe. And then lawyers probably have a couple of specialized tools, but in general, probably not as many as an architect. And so, like, go to the other visual fields, graphic design. Um, you they don't use as many tools because they're working in a very specific medium where we need to be multimedia, with the end result being
Hmm.
a building. Um, Contractors, I guess they use quite a bit of softwares, but again, it's very specialized, very niche based on what trade they're representing or what portion of the project they're participating in. But yeah, anything that will kind of consolidate effort and not have to do a bunch of file management and exporting and importing, that catches my attention. And so, Arcol tries to cover what SketchUp, Excel, Revit, and, we talked about those digital whiteboard tools as well. And, if you can keep people in a single platform, the more they use it for those purposes, the more the engagement, the more they use it, and the more they tend to explore and find other use cases. So keeping people in a single platform is not just good for, file management and data exchange, but it encourages further use and exploration. When we first, deployed Revit, I mean, this is back in 2006. I wasn't at GWWO at the time, but I was involved with launching BIM Revit at another office at the time.
What office was that?
They're not in business anymore. It was actually, it's funny, I'm totally off topic, but
No, fuck it. Let's go.
I graduated in 2009 with a master's from the University of Illinois architecture program. And that was during the recession. And there were no jobs. Anybody that graduated undergrad, they all lost their jobs. I would get no response back, sending resumes to the void, phone calls, cold calls. I was doing cold calls. I went down, there was you go into phone book, architect. It was terrible. And so, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, we said, okay, whoever gets the first full-time job gets to determine where we live. So we had to open up our, we always thought that we would go live in Chicago and live the Chicago lifestyle. And, but no, there was no jobs. There's still a suffering job economy. Like, it's not as robust as it was before the recession. I know because I've been watching it, because is there ever an opportunity to move back to Chicago? I don't know. I kind of have a family here now, but the idea was, so Baltimore was the first one, and he basically gave me a weekend to get here. I flew out for an interview on my own dime, because that's what you did back then. And I, had an interview, it went great. He was showing me all the different neighborhoods that the young people live in. And he says, like, yeah, I'll contact you. And I heard nothing for a week. And so I reached back out and said, hey, what's going on? And can you start Monday? It's like a Friday. And so I had to get my life together and halfway across the country, start on Monday. And the rest of the staff, he wasn't there that day. And the rest of the staff had no idea I was coming. So there wasn't a computer set up for me, nothing. So that should have been my first warning flags that this wasn't a good place to work. And so, I launched BIM in that office, and then I left. So it's good luck. They're not in business anymore. Probably for many, many reasons.
It seems like a haphazard hiring process.
I don't remember how we started down that track, but that's just that's.
I think one of the trends you've talked about is tool consolidation, and I think it's actually a really important way that we think about building Arcol, which is yes, we're this feasibility tool, but there's a lot of concept tools and feasibility tools. And I think the mistake that a lot of them are making is the end output of that feasibility process is the presentation that you're showing to the client. And today, in 99.9% of those workflows, the format of that is a PDF. Yeah. And none of those other feasibility, concept, SketchUp replacement, early SD, whatever you want to call them, tools actually allow architects to make that presentation. And that's not just a subtle thing. And being all in one, from my perspective, it could sound biased because it means we get to charge users more money and we get to capture more value. The actual reason why it's really important that we're all in one, and the tool consolidation piece, is you have this seamless connection of data from importing your site context through to creating your presentation. And that presentation, the output that you're being paid for, is linked back to your model. Right. So whereas today in your world, if you adopt another feasibility tool that doesn't care about documentation, you still have the problem of great, I have my design and my data, but I got to get this into PowerPoint or InDesign somehow. And
Right.
what if we're in a meeting with a client and we got to make a change? Well, I got to call my SketchUp guy. We got to make a change to model and recalculate in Excel. And it's
Yeah.
this like un uh, not connectivity, not a good phrase, of that data that's really important. That to me is the problem that we're trying to solve in Arcol. Our long term roadmap is how can we do that for every stage of documentation? Arcol moves from a feasibility tool to an SD tool to a DD tool to a CD tool until you can go from literally selecting your site through to making construction documentation. All of that is connected seamlessly.
Hmm.
And the value isn't we're just an all in one tool. The value is the you're saving time by not having to like connect all these arbitrary workflows together.
Right.
Um, Let me pivot to something slightly different.
Sure.
You, we talked in the beginning about being multi-office and over the pandemic having to work in a more collaborative ecosystem. How do you see this playing out in the long term? My view of this is like the current incumbent tools, Revit, isn't inherently collaborative. How do you see the next 10 years of like design in our industry playing out? Do you think this is just more we're in this desktop based environment and we collaborate on top of Miro style environments, or does that actual modeling environment undergo a shift? And I realize this may seem like a biased question, but there's actually like both are logical answers. Like there's actually not a correct answer. I'm curious for your take on it.
Well, I mean, from a BIM and documentation standpoint, like we're all looking for the next Revit. I get asked often like, what's going to be the next Revit? And I just there's no. I was like, I don't think it's going to be another single software installation that's going to replace it. I don't think the next transformation, from CAD to BIM, BIM to something else. I don't think that it's going to look the same as
Hmm.
other developments in our industry have taken. I think the data becomes what's the most important thing, and how all stakeholders interface with that data is where the progress we're going to see. So if the data is what's important and that's central and everybody has access to the pieces of that data that they need to do their job, then sure, I can work in Revit, make some changes, and then it'll update at all the other interface points that the other stakeholders are using. So if the person in the SketchUp like tool uses their push pull modeling to change the mass, the data will reflect that down to Revit, and Revit will make adjustments along with it. So if that data can be standardized and utilized, then we don't really need to change our tools so much. We are just interface with the way we interface with that data. That becomes the most important thing. Like the steel detailer has what they need. The person doing furniture, they have what they need. Like every engineer will have access to the pieces of the data that they need, and then their updates get pushed and then distributed to all the other people that are interfacing with the same data. I think that's more what like the future is going to be like. I mean, that's a heavy lift to get to that point because it's a lot of standardization, and I don't know. That's for people smarter than me. Um,
You're smart too, Dan. Come on.
yeah, that's that's where I think that's my where I think it's going anyway.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I don't think you'd find anybody that disagrees with that. I think you'll find people that disagree on the medium of that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Greg Schluser at HOK and some of the work that the open specification is doing is this is really, like, to your point, a data problem. We need to atomize all this data so you can take it into any file format. Arcol's view of this is like actually Revit is the problem, and you have to replace the core underlying design tool before you can have real collaborative workflows built on top.
Sure.
Um, but I think we'll all agree on the future, which is like we shouldn't be tool dependent, and you
Right.
should be able to collaborate seamlessly with all stakeholders and be all looking at the same single source of truth of data. Um, my view is just that you'll be doing that in Arcol. That's that's my view of the future, and obviously that's biased. Um, Speaking
You're
of which,
entitled.
um, I don't like asking the question, "What's your favorite feature of Arcol?" I think it's just patting ourselves on the back, and I much prefer hearing from users like, what are we fucking up on? What are we not doing a good job at? Do you want to see us do more of?"
I mean, you consider it as a feasibility study tool. Like you're not the SD tool yet, right? So, there's still going to be, we get so far and then we have to go to another application because, like it or not, most of my designers author their designs in SketchUp, finishes, details, mullions, window type, like all that information, that extra level of detail beyond massing. So, I mean, what I'm looking forward to is the next steps, the next evolution. From a feasibility standpoint, like when we started, design options had just come out, and having the data side by side has been a huge improvement because we're not just providing one option, we're providing, three, four, five options to the client, and being able to have that all in one place instead of having five different Revit files or five buildings in a single Revit file, and again going back and forth between SketchUp and Revit. That I believe that's when we became customers, is when design options came out and we were able to have that all side by side, make changes and have the data reflect that change immediately. So as far as like, what could Arcol be doing better right now? I mean, we have that open dialogue. I mean, I just talked to Mike last week, and it's just like, it'll be awesome if we had a color scheme that showed, how far off a program we are in like a gradient color scheme. So it's like the lightly colored green is you're close, dark colored green is you're far away from the program area. And it's just little ideas like that we just, spitball back and forth, and most of those you end up incorporating. So,
We try our best.
yeah, right. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that there's anything major based on what you're marketing yourself as right now. You know what I mean?
Yep.
When you get to the point in which you know, are ready to kind of take on the early design stuff from, the SketchUp like work, then we can talk about that. I have lots to say about that too. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't say that, other than the little things as we kind of encounter them, nothing major that you guys are fucking up. It's all good.
I think I know we're coming up on time, but I just want to like impart with this final like how I think about this. Um, uh, this to me is like one of the biggest risks that we and maybe I'll cut this piece out, but we'll see if it goes through. To me, one of the biggest risks of Arcol is like we've said for a long time we're Figma for BIM and we want to kill Revit, and we learned very quickly we actually had to narrow down really
Yeah.
deeply into feasibility and just excel at that. And I think the
Mhm.
risk is like we actually don't broaden our scope a little bit. We actually don't do that fast enough.
Mhm.
The speed of transition from feasibility to schematic design and like true schematic design, actually outputting the documentation you care about at that stage. That's the like velocity of us doing that is the risk to our goal. We either do
Yeah.
it too fast and we haven't really built product market fit deeply enough at feasibility, or we do it too slow and people just think of us as this feasibility tool.
Right.
Um, so I think what the point you're getting at of like uh, users in the firm still have to use tools like SketchUp and SD is a thing we hear from practically all of our users. The
Sure.
biggest, when I ask this question to our users, they say, just do more modeling. Like, allow me to do more stuff in Arcol, which, as CEO of the company, is like a very good thing to hear. But it means that
Sure.
we have to time that speed of that really important.
Yeah.
Um, we're coming up on time. Anything else you want to impart people with? Any other words of wisdom?
Yeah. If anybody's relying on me for wisdom, they're in trouble. Um, no, I mean it's been fun. I mean, you guys are a lot of fun to work with. Like you said, like we were on the phone on a Tuesday talking through something, or you're doing onboarding for a group of my staff, and they come up with something, and usually that features in by Friday. Like it's just been a real pleasure. A lot of, I have wish list items on the Autodesk Revit wish list forum that have been there for 10, 12 years and just haven't been touched. And it's a real pleasure to work with the smaller startup companies that are hungry. Um, they're not just kind of stuck in a maintenance mode, actually innovating, trying new things. So I applaud you guys for that. It's been a real pleasure.
I appreciate that. It has been equally as fun. We work with a lot of firms, and I would most likely definitely cut this part out. But there are very few firms that I really enjoy actually talking to design technology leaders at, and and like I think I break design technology leaders down to two camps. You're either a like how can we improve our current process, or how do we look to the future? And to me, the former, the one that is thinking about Revit, is just a like I get it. You're working on your firm's improvement. And you've got bills to pay and like projects get done, but this industry is undergoing a retooling, and if you're not aware of that and abreast of it, and maybe not paying for solutions, but talking to people like Arcol and other companies, I think you're doing the role that you serve, a design technology leader, an injustice. So I
Yeah.
applaud you for being a super innovative and forward-looking design technology leader. Not just saying that because you're paying our call a license fee. I'm saying that because I truly think it. Dan, I really appreciate you taking time. This is fun,
Yeah.
and we'll
Yeah.
chat soon.
Let's do it again sometime.